Friends.
So we have to behave now, I guess.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pej's Recovery Corner. I have a couple of really nice people that I just met in the last few months as my guests today. Michael Lynn and Lee McGinnis. Welcome to the corner to both of you.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Good to have you both. Michael's outside of Philadelphia and Lee is in Virginia. And they actually have a podcast together. Go ahead and tell them what it is.
Go ahead and tell them what it is, Mike.
Okay. It's the Daily Reflection Podcast. Every day, well, not every day, nearly every day, we interview members of the recovery community to hopefully get some experience, strength, and hope through the lens of the Daily Reflections book. Everybody's familiar with that book.
Awesome.
Yep. Available on all podcast networks.
Right.
He's such a pro. I mean, you could just tell his voice, the way he talks, so soothing. It's like
this is why we
podcast voice. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But first and foremost, because we are on this Recovery Corner podcast, I always like to delve deep into people's pasts and dissect and see who they are, where they grew up, what happened, and basically what changed and that absolute decision that they changed their lives. So we'll start with, should we, ladies first? Lee,
Sure.
Who are you? Like, where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Who am I is the question I've been asking myself here lately. I don't know. It's unfolding. Let's see. So I am, first of all, I've been sober since January 1st, 2012. And I grew up all over the world. I was born, I'm 57 years old. I was born in 1963. And my father worked for the intelligence community. So we traveled around the world and always moving, always going to new countries where I didn't speak the language and didn't quite fit in. And that's kind of where the story starts, actually.
Okay. So moving around a lot.
Yep.
And I won't even ask about the intelligence part. The second I hear that, I'm just thinking like,
I'd have to kill you. So yeah, I mean, let's see. I lived in the United States for a few years. We moved to Hong Kong during the Vietnam War while my dad was serving there. And then we came back and then we went to the Dominican Republic and then down to Argentina and then back for a little while and then to Rome, Italy during my high school years. So my childhood really was just a bunch of moving, showing, literally moving. We assimilated into the culture of the country that we were in. So we really had to learn the language. Nobody learned English to accommodate me. I had to learn the languages. And we usually showed up late into the school year, like a month or so. And, landed in a country that, I didn't speak the language, didn't know anybody. And that kind of started the whole not necessarily fitting in, not feeling part of, kind of feeling left out of the circle. Mm-hmm. And then just to compound that, the life inside the home was pretty dysfunctional. I always say I was born into unmanageability right out of the birth canal. So it was just a kind of the inside the house was somewhat traumatic. Outside the house was not necessarily always comfortable. And so, yeah, that
so
was that.
In that case, so what happened? How old were you when you first started using or drinking, or which one was it?
I actually started using before I started drinking.
What did you use?
I first started smoking weed. Well, my very first drug of choice was cigarettes.
Okay.
And then
that's a drug.
Yeah. And it's funny because I started using addictively right off the bat because the very first time I smoked, my friend taught me how to smoke. So a big part of my story early on was that I told people that I used to be cool. Like I said, I used, even though I never had. And then when people would break it out and I would have to do it because I had been saying I was doing it. So one of my friends taught me how to smoke. And
how old were you?
I was 12 years old. She taught me how to smoke cigarettes and I somehow had a pack of cigarettes. Can't remember how I got those, but and I went out behind my house and laid down in the woods and smoked the entire pack. And that's me right off the, like I go big or stay home. And
That
I smoked
that
the
sounds
entire
like
pack and got sick.
sounds like major addictive behavior.
Oh yeah, seriously. And I smoked the entire pack, got super sick, and then proceeded to keep smoking. Like getting sick did not deter me from smoking. And then that's pretty much how I started doing all the other drugs. And I started out smoking weed. I graduated to other pills. Back in the day, we used to do a lot of Quaaludes and speed and anything else we
I
could
think
get.
they were called cross tops back then. If you're around the same age as me, those speed pills were cross tops, right?
Cross tops, yep. And then quickly
Quaaludes,
graduated.
we don't even hear about Quaaludes anymore. I think they're outdated. Like it's a whole different.
I don't know if they make
animal
them
these days.
anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be called Lemon 714.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. 714s. We used to smoke them and
There was
take them.
Red Devils or something like that. There was a bunch of different names for them, right?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, I don't know how old you guys
time
are.
ago.
I might be the baby of the bunch. I don't know. You know, these are
Maybe.
just things I heard in passing. Okay, so then it became some pills and things like that. And at this point, you were what age?
13, 14, 15, right around 15, 16. I came back to this country from having been in Italy for a few years. And I started doing hallucinogenics. And true to addict form, I was doing them in my room at night by myself. I did everything, but I did everything with my friends, but then I just wanted to go home and do it by myself. Seclude and do it and go big with it. And I started selling drugs to be able to use for free. And yeah, it was just, I ended up dropping out of high school. It's hard to use that way and actually go to class and pay attention and learn things. I went to school to buy drugs and sell drugs, really.
Right.
And then I started working and decided I didn't want to go to school anymore and quit school at the age of 16.
Little rebel.
Yep. I was a rebel. I was a little hippie girl.
Okay.
Complete with batik, tie-dye skirts and patchouli oil.
Well, yeah, patchouli. That's the one. Did you? So what did you do? Like, were you in America at the time?
Yeah. So we came back to this country in 1979, and I've been here ever since. And I was a junior in high school, and I think I stayed in school for a couple of months and quit, and then started working. So I've really been working ever since. I did end up going back to community college. They accepted me at community college provided I got my GED, and I did do that at the age, I think, 19 to 21. I went to community college, and but I continued to use and honestly for a long time. I mean, I used addictively, but for a long time it was manageable. In some ways. I mean, that story continues to unfold. Really,
right. So it wasn't. I understand that because I think all throughout my young adulthood, I was making it work and there wasn't wreckage that was quite yet being created. I think that started to happen in my later 20s. So you say you've been sober, what, 9 years or is it?
Yeah, a little over 9 years.
All right. So what happened that you got sober?
Well, a whole bunch of stuff.
Was there a crisis? Was there a crisis in your life or something?
If they had come up with a cure for the horrible hangover, I'd probably still be drinking today. But what happened was that the two things started happening. One is I think my body stopped processing alcohol as well as it had for years and years. I used to always say that I never got a hangover. Like I used to kind of be bummed out that I didn't know what a hangover was. And I could drink and drink and drink and then get up and go to work the next day. I used to work out heavily and run and all those things, and it never impacted me. But at a certain point, I would say in my 40s, it started taking a toll on my body, and I started getting really sick. And so I was just sick around the clock, and I started having blackouts and brownouts. My
What's
behavior.
A brownout?
So a brownout is sort of periods of for me anyway. A brownout is, a blackout to me is I just can't remember large expanses of time. Like I went out drinking last night. I have no idea what happened. I don't know where I ended up. Somehow it's the next day and I'm at your house and I don't know how I got there. A brownout is just where pieces of time are missing. I kind of know what happened. Can't remember exact pieces of conversations. But I was sort of in and out of the evening or in and out of the day. And I call that a brownout. And I came up with that, and I'm sure I didn't invent it, but the blackout didn't quite apply when people were sharing. And I either came up with it or somebody said it somewhere in a meeting, and I went, oh yeah, that was me.
Okay. That sounds like some East Coast talk right there, because I never heard of a brownout.
Yeah.
Although I love going to East Coast and experiencing East Coast recovery. So now you live and reside in Virginia. You're a working woman. Did you ever go back to school and finish school, like high school or anything like that?
Nope. I got a GED, and then I went to 2 years of community college, and I'm just really resourceful and a hard worker when I'm sober. So I've managed to do okay for myself. But I never did go back. And, I've thought about it because it's one of those things I do wish I had done differently. I didn't have a whole lot of consequences out there. If I look at legal consequences, jails, institutions, death, I didn't have that. But I gave everything away. I gave my education away. I mean, luckily I grew up overseas, so I got an education just based on being exposed to world culture, different cultures and world events. I mean, when we lived in South America, there were 5 forms of government in 5 years and military coups and like all kinds of stuff. So you get exposed to things, you get an education.
You learn. Yeah, you learn.
You learn. And I read. So my first drug of choice, I said, was cigarettes. Really, it was books. So I read voraciously, I think, to escape my dysfunctional family life. So
it happens a lot. People get lost in the books. Sometimes you have the addict, sometimes you have the alcoholic, and then sometimes you have the bookworm who just gets lost in the books and doesn't want to deal with all that bullshit that's going on within the dysfunctional family function. Okay, so and now married, kids, anything like that?
Nope, not married. Yes, kid. I have a 27-year-old son. I was married a few times, and another drug of choice. So
when you say a few times, that's not a couple. That's few.
More than a couple, less than a whole bunch.
Okay.
But yeah, I tried to escape. I tried to escape by finding, my little inner circle. I think I was always trying to find the solution to my life's problems. And it was never within myself. It was always either in drugs or alcohol or relationships. And it's interesting because at this stage in my recovery and my life, I'm starting to see that for what it really is. And it's like the new frontier, as I think Bill Wilson called it at one point, who was one of the founders of one of the recovery programs that are out there. Relationships are the new frontier, and it's something we don't have. We are not equipped to handle or manage. Most of us addicts and alcoholics have no idea what we're doing, and we try to do it. And so that was just one of the ways that I tried to find relief. But of course I didn't have the skills for it. And under the influence of drugs or alcohol, most relationships aren't gonna work. And in fact, I married my son's dad because we did a lot of cocaine together. And when you do cocaine together, I don't know if you know this, but you bond. Like, it's amazing the connection that you forge.
And nothing like like that sensational feeling that you get from being with somebody else experiencing the cocaine.
I know.
Groove.
I always said I would have.
What a relationship!
I would have married your grandma if I did coke with her.
It's everything, right? It's everything.
Yeah. So those did not work out, and but I did get gifted a beautiful son, and he's now 27 years old, and we have a great relationship. And I'm a sober, drug-free mom today. So,
good. Yeah. I love that. Your son is lucky to have that. Yeah, I love that. Good to learn about you a little bit, Lee.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, Mike.
Yeah.
Tell me about yourself. Grew up? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up very close to where I'm at now. I grew up in a town called Levittown, Pennsylvania, and my first foray into mind-altering substances was a gift from my brother. I was about 11 years old. He gave me a bag of pot.
What a gift!
Yeah.
What a gift.
And there was a person that was kind of babysitting us, and he was interested in this person. He's a couple of years older than me, and he gifted me this bag of pot and a pipe, and told me to scram. And I took that, and I got a lighter, and I packed the pipe, and I had never done it before. And like I said, I was about 11 years old, and I went in behind this bush between the building. We lived in an apartment complex. And I took the first hit and I coughed my head off. Yeah. And it wasn't a pleasant experience.
Was it shitty pot? Was it shitty weed? Or
it was shitty weed. It was shitty weed. But what happened was I tried again, and I tried again and again, and I kept coughing. And over a short period of time, you'll be familiar with this. Something floated down and enveloped me. And it was just this sweet release, like just a sweet, the problems of the world. The problems of the world went away, and I chased that for many years, and I didn't become an addict right away, but I did find that through drugs and alcohol, I could find that sweet relief, and I used, on the weekends whenever I could, we would hang outside of the beer store and try and get people to buy us beers and things like that until through my teens and for the most part, alcohol was a social lubricant for me. And I carried that through, my young adulthood. So, from a fairly dysfunctional family, had some depression and alcoholism in the family. And I think I kind of was exposed to that early on. So the solution that I found was in drugs and alcohol for a long time. Kind of managed to keep it together. I married my wife very young. We were 19 at the time. My son came along before we were married, and that kind of hurried things along. And for the most part, my 20s, I held it together. I was drinking out of control on the weekends, but managed to hold it together. I got really lucky with a couple of job opportunities, and I'm a hard worker. So, so managed to pull a decent career together.
You're like a family man, but you drank on the weekends and you held it together, and you provided for. You had a son at the time, right?
Yeah. And my daughter came along pretty quickly thereafter.
Okay.
So, yeah, 2 kids.
Damn, you already had kids in your 20s. Wow.
Yeah. Amazing kids. They're great. And for the most part, that responsibility kind of held the drinking at bay. But I was an avid drug user. My drug of choice at the time was meth and some cocaine. And
so wait a minute, they had meth outside of Philly during.
Oh yeah.
What years was this?
My son was born in 1987, so through the 1990s.
Are we talking like crank, like crystal meth?
Yeah, crank. Yes. Yeah.
This like the biker dope.
Yes.
Jet fuel, and you were snorting this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They make tires out of it now.
Yes, they do. There's a distinct smell, but it's a trip because back then we had it on the West Coast, and I would travel to North Carolina or New York, and I had some, and people were like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
So wow, they actually had it in your area.
Oh,
but then again,
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of bikers in your area too, so you never know how it actually got there. Right. Okay, so you were doing meth, and that was because you were.
Oh, it was the perfect pick me up when I had drank too much.
Oh, for sure. It really helps you feel the effect produced by alcohol, right?
Absolutely.
You can go all night long.
You can go all night long.
You don't even get drunk, really.
And I did. Much to the dismay of my wife.
You pushed it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, kind of burned the candles at both ends. Did really well in my career. Managed to do fairly well on the career front, and left the world. I ended up working on Wall Street for a number of years, and
wow,
it started to become a problem. The drinking started to become a problem. Oddly enough, on my way home from this job, I'd work really hard all day, and then I would get on that train, and I would promise myself I wasn't going to drink on the way home.
Right.
And yet every night I would have a couple of tall boys and a couple of airplane bottles of vodka, and that would be just the start. And by the time I got home, if I made it home, there were a couple of bars that were stopped at on the way home. And
were you in your 30s at this time?
Yeah. So there was a kind of an acknowledgement that I had a problem. I did attend a meeting or two of a 12-step recovery program, and didn't stick and stay. I did see someone very close to me, a relative of mine, go into one of the programs and find success there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a kind of a good example for me. And when things got really bad, which didn't really happen for another 10 years, I stayed out there for another 10 years, getting worse and worse and worse in terms of the drinking. So I knew where to go when it got really bad. And I guess
that family member that it worked for was like it was a possibility. It showed you that, maybe for some this works. You just weren't ready yet.
Yeah. It was an amazing example, to see somebody completely transform their lives. So
and then you got sober. How long have you been sober now?
7 years.
And you got sober pretty much in your 40s? Is that when it happened?
Yeah, it was 48.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was it? What was your crisis, or what made you actually decide, make that absolute decision that I got to do this?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a different term for it, but I'll call it my bottom. My bottom happened around the time I was asked to participate in a company meeting, and this was going to happen in Miami. And I started drinking, many days before I actually had to get on a plane. And those brownouts occurred, and I have this vague recollection of being in Miami and waking up the morning that I was supposed to participate in this company meeting, and just being completely out of control. So what do we do? What do we alcoholics do? We continue drinking.
Yep.
And it was a bit of a shit show. So I came back from that experience. I found my car in the airport parking lot, retrieved the vodka bottle from the back of from the wheel well, in the trunk, and proceeded to drink that the rest of the way home. I don't remember getting home, and came to under my desk, and I think it was the next day, and my wife was actually leaving, and that was the bottom. And a short while after that, the phone rang, and it was a guy I had met in a 12-step recovery meeting about 6 months earlier. And he asked me how I was doing. And in that moment, I kind of made a decision to get honest. And while it was difficult, that started the journey back. And I'm grateful for that phone call.
I love that. So you're not really a product of treatment or anything like that. You didn't go to a treatment center. You just went through a community, through one guy that helped you kind of show you the path of recovery in that sense. That's excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to discount treatment. I work in treatment. I believe in treatment. I think it's great. It works for a lot of people, but I always admire people that just come into the path of the 12-step path and enter and stay.
Yeah. Hey man, it takes what it takes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we're all maybe around the same age. It's nice to be able to interact with people that it's a trip, because you guys are in different parts of the country, but we all had our own journey. We all had our own fun with it until it wasn't fun anymore. Right. I think for a long time we managed, and as you get older, you have these little realizations like, maybe my life isn't working out for me. Maybe maybe there's the little signs, the writings on the wall. She's leaving. He's leaving. It's not working. So now that you both are sober, and you've I know that I think you guys met during pandemic, the two of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how'd that happen?
You want to take it?
Sure. So what happened was, it's interesting because I had done, so one of the things I do every year at the end of the year is kind of do a review of my year, and, what am I grateful for? What I like to honor the past year and then look ahead. What are the things I want to work on? And one of the things I really wanted to do in the upcoming year was start a podcast of some kind. And I'm a wellness and nutrition coach and a small business coach, and I'm in the personal development field for work. And I was like, I just want to do something, but I have no idea how to do it. But I wrote that down, and on January 1st is my anniversary. I turned 9 years, so clean and sober on the 1st of January. Mm-hmm. And then 2 days later, I was in a meeting one of my meetings that I regularly attend on Zoom, and Mike was leading. And he was there with his get up like he is right now, headphones. He had this cool like background brick, and he was like in this recording studio that I didn't realize at the time was a virtual background, but it looked super cool. And he's leading, and then I shared, and he reached out and asked me if I would be a guest on the podcast. And I, of course, jumped all over that. And I think 2 days later, I was interviewed by Mike for the podcast. And I asked him for some tips on, I was like, hey, maybe I can pick your brain. And we don't even actually know how this happened, but somehow I started doing all the admin for him. So I offered my support and help, which was really probably fortuitous for him, because I don't know how he would have kept that going much longer, because he was doing an episode every day. And
so the podcast that you went on for him was not Daily Reflection.
It was.
No, it was. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
You already had that going.
Yeah.
Kind of. So tell him how it started out, and then.
Yeah. So it started out in much of a different form. I was kind of challenged I was in a leadership training program, some continuing education. And I had talked about setting a goal to do a podcast. And the trainer running the education basically challenged me to go ahead and just launch it. So without thinking too much about it, I said, well, what do I know best? I live my life in recovery. I have purpose in my life because of, the program of recovery. So I spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I want to help people. What could I do in that space and do a podcast? So I said, well, let me just start a daily podcast. And what better way than to simply just read a piece of inspirational literature? I settled on the Daily Reflection. I secured the domain name. I got the podcast hosting, and I just started myself reading the Daily Reflection. Pretty boring.
No, it's not boring at all, actually. And it's not called Daily Reflections, like the book that's out.
Right.
It's called Daily Reflection. No. I think it's wonderful. I think it's a great idea. And what's wrong with reflecting daily, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started doing that, and then the thought occurred to me, well, maybe if I expand on the reflection myself, but then people are going to get tired of hearing just me blather on. So maybe I'll pull people in and have them read the reflection and interview them, and that's how it started. I had someone that's close to me in the program do the first episode, and then I just started looking for other folks that had a powerful message, and Lee was one of the first people that I interacted with, and oddly enough, she wanted to do something similar. So
I love that.
So I started producing, I started booking as guests, and we created all these systems. Like, we're the most systematized,
thank you.
podcast. But I started booking and doing admin, and and next thing you know, we're co-hosting together, and we were doing an episode every single day, and interviewing probably 3 or 4 people a day, and then editing every night. And it was a labor of love and a mission. We say that we're on a mission from God, and the thing is, just like what you're doing, Pej, and it's so valuable because we're reaching people that haven't necessarily found themselves in some sort of a recovery program or in rehab. We're reaching people where they live. And hopefully people can identify in and see what we're all about without having to necessarily walk into the rooms of some sort of recovery program. Because that's scary for people.
Very scary. I got to say, it's really interesting. There was a time where, I was involved in obviously 12-step meetings live, and I'd heard of some meetings that were available online, right? But this is before pandemic, and so I always thought to myself, would I ever go online, and how does that even work? Do you see them? Or is it just voices, or everybody's just sharing? So anyway, when pandemic hit, we obviously had to resort to going online. So Zoom stocks went way up. Everybody utilized Zoom in all different aspects, churches and schools and the 12-step community, and so. That's how we all met, right? So when I got on there, I thought, and then you get these people that were like, I won't do Zoom. I'm not going to do Zoom. And even those motherfuckers were on Zoom afterwards, after a little while, because they couldn't go to their respective meetings or wherever they were going before. So regardless of the fact, we're all on Zoom. And then the next thing you know, I'm like, wait a second here. I'm like in meetings in Scotland and shit. Like, this is cool, right? I don't know what they're saying. I can't understand a word they're saying, but it's cool. Like, the language of the heart is being spoken here. So I love the way that you two met, and it's that way and that's how friendships develop. So is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? There's a lot of people that were totally anti-Zoom and still don't like it, and they love the human interaction. But look at what's happened here. Like, this pandemic actually brought a lot more of humanity together, and in the recovery community, brought a lot of people together too. I think that it was Lee that met Boo Boo first, right? Is that how?
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
And Boo Boo's one of my best friends, and he's now in Arizona. He left Ohio during this whole thing, and that's how I met you guys. And you guys had me on your show, and I loved it. I thought it was excellent. Like, it was really cool to be able to pick a reading from the Daily Reflection and just freestyle it, you know. So what a beautiful experience. So how can people find you guys?
Yeah, one way is through podcasts. Whatever podcast app you use, it's available on Google Podcasts. It's available on Apple Podcast. It's available on Spotify. It's available.
And they just type in Daily Reflection
Podcast. You'll find it. You can also visit the URL www.dailyreflectionpodcast.com, and you'll see a list of all of the episodes we have there. Just trying to get a reference for what episode is Pej on. Let's see.
And just to clarify, it is Daily Reflection, singular, podcast.com. Because if you type in the S, you're not going to find us.
Right. Yep. There's no S. Well, you know how I found out? Because I typed in an S before, and it didn't. Go. I was like, where is this? Cool.
So episode 135 from May 14th, 2021 is Pej A. No God, no peace. Remember that?
That's right.
NOW.
Yep.
It was an amazing episode, Pej. We had so much fun recording it. And one of the beautiful things about the podcast, and I'm sure you're finding this on yours as well, is that we're hearing all the voices of recovery. So what we know is that everybody's addiction and everyone's alcoholism is different. And it's that comparing in that makes you open and willing to maybe hear about a solution that you hadn't thought of before. And so what we want, our mission really is to get all these voices out into the world so that somebody will hear what they need to hear. They'll hear their story or something that resonates with them. And so we let people talk about whatever they want. They can talk about drugs, alcohol. We have, we just want to be as inclusive and diverse as possible with regard to our guests. And it's been a beautiful experience. It's been, and we've said we aren't interviewing together anymore because it's too much. Like you cannot, it's not sustainable to do this the way at the rate that we were doing it. So we've split up and we've started interviewing individually, and it's kind of sad because we've missed, I miss anyway. I don't know, Mike, speaking for you too, but we used to look at each other sometimes after the interviews and we would be like, holy shit, we have a front row seat to the best show in town, which is to get to hear your story. Absolutely. Like one-on-one, and the space is so safe that people feel free to really share authentically and from the heart. And you don't always get to do that anywhere. There's nowhere that you can really, even in a meeting, you're kind of, if you're in a recovery meeting, you're kind of limited to sort of the convention, I guess, of that meeting. But in this, people can, we've had grown big burly men break down and cry. We've had, it's just people read poetry.
They share their favorite prayers and
beautiful.
It's amazing. It's an amazing space.
And they've talked about, we've had people talk about how the understanding of the God of their understanding came about, or they've shared that they don't believe in God, or they, whatever their story is. And it's everything belongs.
Right. Beautiful. And you two, now let me ask this. Have you two ever actually met each other in person?
I'll let Mike answer that one.
No.
That's right. We haven't.
It's amazing, but we haven't.
Yeah.
So.
You're so like the way you guys, your delivery, the way that you work together, you collaborated so well. Like you'd think you're best friends and you've never even met in person. Wow.
This is what happens when you spend, sometimes 6 hours a day, working on a common mission. Yeah.
And I think that's the key. It's a common mission. I mean, it is so purpose full. It's our goal is to help the sick and suffering addict or alcoholic feel like they have a place to belong. And
that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about. That's what
matters.
matters.
Walk people home. We're walking each other home. And
that's right.
So yeah.
Something just came to mind that a friend of mine always uses that term, and I need to have you guys have him on the podcast. I had him on here a couple of weeks ago. He's just a powerhouse of spirituality. I think you'd both enjoy him very much. But I love what you're doing. I love it. I think it's wonderful. I love who both of you are. You're wonderful human beings that are really deep spirited souls that are helping a lot of people. And I appreciate people like you. This is deep. Like, this is good stuff. Mm-hmm. Doing God's bidding and for good purpose. You know what I mean? People do need to tune in and hear this stuff. So I'm going to always rave about daily reflection, not reflections, right? Yeah. Not plural. But definitely. So I really appreciate you guys coming on here today. If you guys have anything else you want to say, go for it, and then we'll tune it on out. Any last words?
I don't know. Just, thank you so much for having us and giving us an opportunity to talk about, our mission. And thank you for the work you're doing, Pej. Yeah. I've listened to your podcast, absolutely fabulous. And just all the other work you're doing out in the recovery world. You're an incredible inspiration. And, when we see people like you, this is exhausting, as you know. I'm sure you get exhausted. But when we see other people like you out there doing it, it makes us want to keep doing it. And what we're doing matters. And even if we help save one life, and that one life does amazing things, and the ripple effect is, we just don't know what we're doing. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. I have I have a half hour every night of meditation and decompressing from the full days of just constantly trying to help people. But it's what we do. I think it's what helps me stay sober. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Right, what helps me stay sober. Yeah. But I appreciate you guys both for coming on the corner. I hope to have you on in the future. And if anybody is looking to hear their podcast, you can find it on Daily Reflection Podcast in any podcast space. Just type it in, Google it. Yep. You'll find it. All right.
You'll find it. Yep.
Michael,
thank you so much, Pej. Just massive gratitude. Thank you for what you're doing. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, signing off. Over and out. Love you.
Love you.
Love you.